I think the challenge for an Indian software as a service entrepreneur trying to crack enterprise in Bangalore is there is not enough of a talent pool available here. That is one big challenge. We are still swimming in a very small pond. There do not exist as many enterprise software as a service companies in Bangalore or Chennai or anywhere in India as they do in New York City or the Bay Area.
Welcome to Prime Venture Partners Podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs looking to build and grow their startups. Learn about uncommon strategies and common traps from makers and doers of startup ecosystem.
Hi, this is Sanjay Swami, Managing Partner at Prime Venture Partners. Welcome to this podcast series. Prime is an early stage VC investing in technology and product focused businesses. Today, I have with me Ashwin Ramesh, founder and CEO of SignUp. Ashwin, welcome to the show. We've worked very closely with SignUp for the past 4 years, and it's been a fun journey and a fun ride to work alongside you. Welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about your journey and, specifically, how did SignUp get started?
Absolutely. And Sanjay, thanks for having me here. And thanks for also investing in SignUp. I wasn't sure that you would do it, but it was great that you took that leap of faith. So my journey actually starts many, many moons ago. So I became an entrepreneur accidentally. The year was 2004. I was still in high school, found this thing called online marketing, fell in love with it. And while I was an online marketer, I found out a big challenge that I was facing personally, which kind of led to the genesis of SignUp.
And how old were you in 2004?
I was 14 years old, just a while ago. So feels like a very, very long time.
Right. So we have a really young teenage entrepreneur here at the age of 14. And tell us about the journey from there till the start of SignUp 8 years later.
Sure. So when I initially started out, like I mentioned, it was completely accidental. I just realized that I could sit at home, freelance, and do this thing called online marketing. So my life started with essentially doing glorified data entry. Online marketing back in the day was like data entry. All you had to do was go in and update meta tags, title tags, build backlinks, and then like magic, your site would rank automatically. I had a lot of fun building that business. So that eventually became a formalized business. And I ran that for about 9 years. Had a lot of fun doing it. Had a lot of fun building this business. And the idea for SignUp came from there, where I realized that if I went through the journey from 2004 to 2013, in 2004, I mentioned that I started optimizing websites, building backlinks and changing meta tags. Everything happened on a website. Fast forward to 2013, nothing was happening on a website. And what I realized was all of my employees were actually doing what I was doing in 2004, data entry, but across different platforms where consumers were actually searching. And this was a humongous waste of time, major pain to do at scale. And I couldn't really find anything that solved that problem. So I realized, hey, nobody's going to fix it for you, fix it yourself. And that's how SignUp came to be.
Awesome. So tell us, you talk about, people who are doing things across multiple platforms. So tell us the core insight of SignUp and with some examples, please.
Sure. So when you search for anything right now, a restaurant, or, when you search for a hospital, or when you search for a, home services provider near you, what you're likely to find is sites that carry reviews, or you're likely to find a profile on Google, or a profile on Foursquare, or a profile on Bing, or you're likely to find it on a place like Instagram. Nobody really goes to websites anymore. So I don't remember the last time I went to a restaurant's website. I don't know. Do you ever go to a restaurant's website? You don't, right? So you find this information on a Zomato or a Google or a Bing or an Instagram. Now, the challenge for the business is that to manage their presence across these places is extremely tedious and time consuming, right? Because all these places are silos. They don't talk to each other. As a consumer, you expect this information you find to be accurate, right? So I expect the menu on Instagram, Zomato, and Google to all be accurate. I trust it over the website that the business has. And now the business is stuck trying to manage their presence across 10 or 12 different places, which becomes a challenge. With SignUp, we have a way in which they can do this seamlessly, automatically, without having to spend all this human effort, so that a consumer, a hungry consumer like you or me, can actually trust the information you're finding online.
Terrific. So, you've built SignUp over the last 3 years or 4 years, and it has evolved quite significantly, right? So on the one hand, I still remember from the early days, you've been an entrepreneur, always focused on making sure that, you have solid revenues in the company, growing at least 100% year over year over the last, several years. And at the same time, the businesses looks very different today from what it looked like, say, 3 years ago when you started. Two major transitions, moving to the enterprise segment as well as building out a huge team in the US. Yeah. So tell us about this journey and how does one do this while maintaining the consistent growth? What were some of the challenges you faced and what advice do you have for entrepreneurs?
Sure. So first thing is, again, it also comes down to the DNA. So I've run a bootstrap business for a very long time. So I ran a bootstrap business for 9 years. So the core DNA that I have, and I think a lot of people at SignUp have, is we always need to keep generating revenue. If you're not generating revenue, we shouldn't be in business. That's our core DNA. And for us, every path to our journey at SignUp was accidental, right? So initially we had no idea what we were doing. Sanjay, sorry to break it to you, we had no idea what we were doing, but I was very convincing. You sat in the same room and pitched you. I don't know why you wrote that check. Initially, we had no idea. It took us some time to figure things out, but we were still making revenue during that path, right? We were not doing SaaS for a long time. It took us a year and a half to realize that we had to do SaaS. And once we started doing SaaS, we realized that, hey, we could start selling software to small businesses globally sitting in India because, there are a lot of people in India doing it, and realized that we could very quickly scale revenues doing that. For us, I think every time we made a change, it was when there was a plateau that happened. So we started initially by selling to SMBs. We had a plateau for 3 months. And usually when a plateau like that happens, I really feel very bad about myself. And we all feel very bad about ourselves. So during the SMB plateau, we first iterated and we figured out that the product we were selling, we couldn't sell it at scale to small businesses while still ensuring that we were profitable. We kept our margins. So our first transition was really moving away from SMB to more of a mid-market to enterprise customer. That was the first kind of transition. And then once we moved to mid-market to enterprise, we figured out that we couldn't really do that completely out of India, which is when I had to personally move to the US, set up a team there, because selling to large businesses requires geographical proximity, right? Large business is going to, they don't want you to be 10,000 miles away when they're spending $1 million a year with you. So all of these stages were extremely accidental. I would say iteration, but more accidental because it was not planned. Initially, if you had asked me in 2014, are you going to do this? I wouldn't know the answer. But I think what really forced us is every time we made the change, it was because we saw a plateau. And like I told you, our core DNA is when we see business slowing down, revenues not growing, we usually tend to take action. And each of these scenarios actually pushed us forward to the next stage in the growth journey. Is this the final end of it? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it is not. I believe it is. This is a very scalable model, but the only constant is change, right? When you're running a business.
Yeah. So having said that, however, I think obviously now you're in a very large segment and winning successfully, with US large enterprises in the US as well as in other parts of the world. One of the big things you've done over the last year, though, is build out a complete, senior management team, which in the past, it was primarily an India-based company with maybe one person in the US, and now there are 30 people in the US and so on. And most Indian companies struggle with both these transitions, right? One is transitioning from mid-market to the enterprise, which you've done successfully. And the second is building out a large, strong team in the US. Can you share a little bit about, how easy or difficult that was? What were some of the tricks you had? What advice you have for other entrepreneurs?
Let me start with the bad part about building a team in the US, burn, right? So be ready for that. If you're an entrepreneur moving from India to the US, be ready for your burn to go up catastrophically when you start a team in the US. So obviously that's the bad thing, but there are a lot of good things about it. So I'll talk about why we did it, what are the reasons you should do it, and how we went about doing it. I think the challenge for an Indian software as a service entrepreneur trying to crack enterprise in Bangalore is there is not enough of a talent pool available here. That is one big challenge. We are still swimming in a very small pond. There do not exist as many enterprise software as a service companies in Bangalore or Chennai or anywhere in India as they do in New York City or the Bay Area. Secondly, even if there are people, they're not proximate to customers. So if you're trying to build a large business, you need to have your sales leadership, your marketing leadership, your CS leadership very proximate to customers. They should be able to jump on a flight, go visit a customer because that is expected from you. And the third thing is that people also have seen a lot more scale. So there's obviously talent pool and proximity and scale. SaaS is a science. It's not an art. So once you hit a particular critical mass, it's just about following a playbook. And unfortunately, we don't have those playbooks here. But there are people out there who have playbooks or who've been part of playbooks who can immensely help you, right? So that's a kind of the reasons why we did that pivot or transition. So one of the things that I did very early on is I realized that I couldn't hire these people myself by going on LinkedIn and contacting them. I tried that for a long time. I would go and I would be like, hey, will you come talk to me? It was extremely time consuming. Then I tried to get my India recruitment team to start hiring people in the US. Did not work out. The quality of people was not good. One of the major transitionary changes we made was I allied with the right recruiters. As being in India, right? So initially when I went there, I saw US recruiters charging 20 to 25% per hire. Right, you can do the math. If you're paying someone $200,000, for instance, you're spending 50K on hiring that person, which for me was like 50K, 35 lakhs. Initially, I was like not very excited about it. The reason why we succeeded was when we allied with the right recruiters who come in with the Rolodex and who know what they're doing. Because a lot of times when you're trying to hire people, you don't know how much you should be paying. You don't know how to comp them because now it's not like India. They won't give you a pay slip, right? You don't know what they're making. You don't know where to look for the right people and you don't know how to go about sourcing them. So our biggest success and how we went about doing it is we allied with 3 specific recruiters, right? 3 of them who I personally vetted, I spoke with, very small firms where I was talking to the actual founder of the recruiting firm and they were like our extended HR team. And the division of labor was they bring in the candidates and I go about interviewing these people and go through a very extensive process. And with each candidate, I actually had my own workbook, right? So for marketing, for instance, there were 10 different factors I was looking at to hire a VP of marketing. In fact, I interviewed about 30 people almost, and each interview lasted about 4 to 5 hours cumulative. This is across 3 different people. So it was not a very simple process. It was a very long process. It was a very thorough process. And the way I was able to pull it off because I was focusing more on, okay, is this the right person rather than focusing on how do I get this person to come in? So how do I get this person to come in is a recruiter's job. Is this the right person is my job. Closing them is also the recruiter's job. So this division of labor worked out really well. It took a lot of time, but we were able to be fairly successful doing this, but it is again a numbers game. The more people you meet, the more people you interview, better your chances are. The other part is also you have to be able to convince them that this is a big opportunity because again, you have to remember so we are in New York City. New York City is the second largest SaaS employer market in the US after the Bay Area. There's a lot of interesting companies around, but you need to be able to convince them why this business is better than anything else. And I think that is also another reason why people end up working for you because you're able to convince them that this is the future.
Those are, I think, really useful insights. Quick question. What about, the choice between New York and the Bay Area? Traditionally, most Indian companies look at the Bay Area as the first option. And obviously, it's from a time zone perspective, probably the worst where you're running a team in India and New York. What were some of the reasons you chose New York and how has that panned out?
I think it's mostly serendipity, right? Because I obviously did not have a location in mind when I wanted to move. I went to NYC because our first few employees were there. We had 4 employees in New York City and I ended up eventually going there. But I think it has actually worked out really well for us. It has worked out really well for us because New York City is an interesting place. So it's an interesting place where you can get an SDR for $40,000. Who'll be living in Queens or the Bronx.
SDRB?
Sales development representative, right? Someone who's actually doing cold calling and setting up, demos for you. So you can get someone like that for $40,000, which is what you would be paying in Texas or Salt Lake City. And you can also get the best product guys who are going to cost the same as the Bay Area. So New York City has a nice microcosm where it's got people who will travel from other states. It's a tri-state area, right? So you have great connectivity over rail to go find a job and it'll be a starter job. And you have the very, very good talent out there. So you can build a nice mix. The Bay Area is a bubble. It's, I think, kind of inflated. So the same sales development representative in the Bay Area will cost you $80,000 for comparison. So I think one good thing that has worked out for us is we've been able to attract the right kind of talent for the right job.
You have the quality of talent as well as the mix between the price points that
exactly.
That are,
so that is one thing I think has worked out really well for us. The second thing that worked out really well for us is also when I moved to New York City, there was this huge talent pool available because a lot of people from the ad tech industry were actually moving out because ad tech was hyperinflated a couple of years ago. Now it's going through a lull. This really good talent that was in ad tech was available and they were all like looking out for a job. They were all interviewing. So this was more serendipity, right? Timing, which was not planned, but that worked out really well. I think third thing is proximity to investors. A lot of people don't believe it, but there are a lot of interesting investors in New York City. In fact, I think there are more investors in New York City than the Bay Area who can actually invest in growth capital, for instance, growth equity. I think there's a lot of proximity to that. And fourth is network. If you start networking into the whole tech circle in New York City, it's a very close circle, but people actually help each other to a large extent. There are obviously different distinct circles. There's the Indian circle, the Israeli circle, different circles. But I think once you're networked, they help you out because New York City is not really a tech town. It's a finance town. It's a tech town. It's a music town. It's an entertainment town. It's a business town. San Francisco is only known for tech. And personally, for me, when I go to Starbucks, I don't find someone right next to me saying they're going to invent the next box, going to be bigger than Aaron Levy, which is what happens in the Bay Area. So that is something I personally like.
Interesting. And I guess New York also probably has a fair amount of your customer base as well.
So our customer base is distributed. We don't have any customers in the Bay Area. Maybe that's also a reason to stay in New York.
Great. So the company has been doing really well, growing really nicely. And what do the next couple of years look like? Staying in the US as a primary market? Will you be expanding internationally?
So unfortunately, in the software business, especially the enterprise software business, a lot of your revenues will come from the US. So
there's nothing unfortunate about it. It's just a statement of fact.
No, it's unfortunate because we have such a large presence in India that we are not able to tap into, right? So Asia could be a large software buying market. It is not. So I do think US will be our primary market, but we do expect to expand considerably in India. So if you look at Asia, right? For us, India and Southeast Asia and all these places put together, they were 0% of our revenues about 12 months ago. Now they're at 10% of our revenue. So that's significantly expanding. I do think there's a huge opportunity here, but I don't think it will be as large as North America, at least for the next few years.
So the primary focus will be
North America, but this would be our upside market. So India, Middle East, Africa, Australia would be our upside market.
Got it. And perhaps Europe as well.
Europe as well, yeah.
Great. Ashwin, it's been an amazing journey so far, but I know the best is yet to come. Wish you and the team all the very best.
Thanks a lot, Sanjay, for having me, and it was a pleasure doing this with you.
Thank you.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app for free, and you'll be the first one to know when new episodes are available. Just search for Prime Venture Partners Podcast in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Castbox, or however you get your podcasts. Then hit subscribe. And if you have enjoyed the show, we would be really grateful if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast. To read the full transcript, find the link in the show notes.